Welcome to this meeting of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting. The meeting is being live streamed, so welcome to all of those who are listening in this morning. A reminder about your mobile phones, please everyone, to turn them off. It's intended that we'll have a break this morning at around 10:30 and lunch at 12 o'clock. We'll get the meeting underway now. Could I ask Mr. Biasini Tule to open the meeting with the council prayer?
Morena, e te mana, ngā rangatira, morena, he karakia tātou. He karakia mo te kaunero o ngā roto Rotorua. E te atua ka rawa, ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātauranga. Mana kitea, mai mātou, o pōnanga e tēnei wā. E mahi nei a mātou mahi o te pānga o ngā tangata, o te kaunihera o ngā roto o Rotorua nui a kaumata momoe. Takua mai ki tau, te rangi Mārie, I runga I a mātou e ngā wā katoa. I iu karaiti hoki, tō mātou ariki, āmeni.
Thank you, Kotawa. Call for any apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Rotorua Tate, who is at a tangi this morning. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just an apology for Mrs. Trumper. I suspect she will be late.
For lateness, thank you.
Calf feeding. It's that time of year.
I'd ask that the apologies from Councillor Rotorua Tate and Mrs. Trumper for lateness be accepted. Can I have a mover for that? Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Councillor Maxwell. Seconded, Councillor Wang. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Sorry.
Could I just acknowledge the passing of Waireti because she was very instrumental when we worked with the advisory committee that was called the Te Arawa Advisory Committee in helping the formulation and the hui around the motu and as a result Te Tata o Te Arawa. So she was very wise counsel then to us at council and to Arapeta Tahana, and she will be really missed, and that's where Meripeka is today. So if we could acknowledge to the family.
Thank you for that acknowledgement.
The Tate family. Thank you.
All right, back to the agenda now. Are there any urgent items that are not on the agenda? Sorry, declarations of interest? Are there any declarations? No? There to be none. Okay, moving on. Any urgent items not on the agenda?
Madam Chair, I would, if possible, like to discuss the rates overdue that was in the newspapers on the other day. I have a couple of points.
That's not an urgent item, so we won't be dealing with that at this meeting. Are there any other urgent items? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. In the light of the engineer's report that confirms that the lakefront
Councillor McPherson, I think we've dealt with this at a previous O&M and SPNF meeting, so...
But the new information, with respect, the engineer's report indicating that we have to be compliant with health and safety regs. My question is very simple. What urgent action has or is being taken in response to that report?
Well, Councillor McPherson, I think that matter was dealt with at the O&M meeting, so I rule that that's not an urgent item to be dealt with today. So are there any other urgent items? There don't appear to be any. Right, page 6 of the agenda. I'd ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 8th of July be confirmed as a true and correct record. Moved Councillor Tapsell, seconded Councillor Donaldson. No further discussion on those. All those in favour please say aye. Against, carried. Next is the reports from Councillor Donaldson and myself from the Local Government NZ conference. Can I ask for a mover that the report elected members' attendance at conference reports from Councillor Donaldson and myself be received? Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seconded, Mr. Thomas. Put the motion. All those in favour please say aye. Against, carried. Councillor Donaldson, do you want to overview your report or we take them as read?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I take it as read. I guess thanks to Hilda, put the link to the video of all the presentations in there, and just click on that and you can see the three presentations that I highlighted as particularly of interest. I took away the one in particular, I think, is the comments of Shamabeel Equeb, if I've got his pronunciation of his name right. And I think I made the same comment at the LTP, when we passed the LTP, regarding funding of local government and his review of the LTPs across the country for the last 3 years and pretty much how we've driven this beast into the ground. Words along those lines, and there needs to be the review of local government needs to address the funding of local government, is where he got to, and I think that was a great message that resonated at the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you for the good, thorough report from the conference. Can I just, through the chair, mention regarding that the Te Maruata meeting that is always held the day before the conference starts, and your comment here, I think, Councillor Donaldson, that if everyone had known that it's open to everyone. Actually, I've always known it to be open to everyone, even the late David Culp, who was president, he attended some of the ones that we were at when it was held, but so this is not a criticism, but it always has been open to everyone, to my understanding. So, kia ora.
If I could just respond to that, Madam Chair. So this conference was live streamed and anyone could have watched all the presentations anywhere in the country. I'm not sure about Te Maruata, but it was quite clear, and the words of Benita Bingham were quite profound in that tikanga Māori has been embraced by local government to a level that you just didn't see 10 years ago, and you know that was clearly obvious. And tautoko, our representatives from Te Tātou o Te Arawa, who are leading with Waiata from the front rows. So yeah, it was quite different, the whole look and feel of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Yeah, I would urge any councillor who has the opportunity to attend a conference of that nature to take up the opportunity. As you can see, there were a wide number of speakers, and as you can see from my report, there was lots to see and learn. So next year in Palmerston North, I urge councillors to attend if they can. So there don't appear any further questions on the report, so we'll move on to the staff reports on page 41. Just bring it. Get there. So we're doing the Rotorua Cemetery Reserve change of reserve classification. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report that the Rotorua Cemetery Reserve change of reserve classification be received? Move Councillor Tapsell. Page 41, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour please say aye. Against, carried. Welcome to Steph and to Jocelyn to overview the report.
Morena tātou. I'm here this morning to overview this report, which is the Rotorua Cemetery Change of Reserve Classification. So the committee will recall back in May this year, Council resolved that we should do some consultation as we initiated the proposed change of classification, which is essentially moving the reserve or reinstalling it as a cemetery reserve. And recognising the which is in line and recognises the gift from Ngāti Whakauē of the land for cemetery purposes. There was a public consultation process that occurred between in June this year across all of our normal platforms, and from that process we received 4 pieces of feedback. The feedback was overwhelmingly in favour or supportive of the return of the land to its becoming a cemetery, and so we have this report for you today to finalise the process, and just would welcome any questions that you have. I've got Steph here if there are any technical questions, and that's the report.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Just looking at the map on page 44, Jocelyn, there's that little portion outside the blue circle at the very top corner, adjacent to White Street Industrial and Tenai Road. Is that what's that status of that bit? And if we put this through, is there anything that's not cemetery reserve left on this site?
Through you, Madam Chair, the remainder of that parcel is already local purpose cemetery reserve.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I don't know, through the Chair, whether this is relevant, but there were some submissions made with regards to this. Were any of the submitted points taken into this inclusion?
We received 4 submissions, and they were all considered as part of the as part of preparing this report. Some of them were operational, the suggestions were operational, and we've taken them into account, but these are the recommendations that we've formed as a result of what we took out to consultation, and that's what we got from there.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you for that, Jocelyn. And just further to what Councillor Kuma has said, was with the submissions that came in, we all received recent correspondence from, I guess one was from Mr. Adams. So those were all taken into consideration. I read through them. So I just wanted assurance from you that they were considered.
Yes, absolutely. That they were, and I think in that particular instance there was a suggestion to set aside a strip and make it available for other purposes. However, that block of land or that piece of land, if we are not using it for the purposes of a cemetery, then it needs to be returned to Ngāti Whakauē underneath the Reserves Act. So we can't consider doing other things with it. We either use it as a cemetery or we return it.
The reason I asked that is that our Ngāti Whakauē protocol meeting that some of us are on, I can recall, might be a year or 2 ago, that one of the members there, Tina, I forgot his surname, but they raised some things in that on it, and they haven't come back with anything that they considered they wanted to do with that area. Do you know? We
received 4 very brief submissions. One was go for it, so there were 4 submissions, and there were, so we didn't get anything.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I was of the understanding that the gifted land for cemetery purposes extended across the road, which included Palmer's and all the businesses up until Puringa Stream Bridge. Is that correct?
We would need to check that. I don't know the answer to that question.
Move on to Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the diagram, looking at the map, it's very helpful. I note to the south of the crematorium and a bit to the west, there's a very large section of RSA, a large section of returned servicemen's graves. of great interest to the RSA. My question's simple. Did the RSA put a return in? Did they make a submission with regard to this proposal?
No, they didn't.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. So I have a mover, Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Your Worship the Mayor. So the motion is that the committee recommends to Council to change the classification of the part of the Rotorua Cemetery Reserve being part section 26A SBRS of Rotorua from Recreation Reserve to Local Purpose Cemetery Reserve pursuant to section 24 of the Reserves Act 1977 by notice in the New Zealand Gazette. All those in favour please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Welcome, JP, to the discussion regarding the Rotorua Economic Development Terms of Reference to support the inner city. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Moved Mr Thomas, seconded Councillor Yates. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Invite JP to overview the report.
Morning, councillors, and through you, Madam Chair. Councillors, this was the follow-up report following the in-principle decision you took at the previous meeting. So in this report, we've sought to just identify again how those objectives will now be used as a process to undertake an investigation into the assigned properties within the CBD. As I stated at the previous meeting, and I'll repeat again here, this is from current budgets, so it's an allocation of funding from district development to RED to undertake these works. There is also an expectation that in developing these business cases, there will be an intention to try and recover some of that investment. So if we go through those due diligence stages and a business proposition is realised, as part of that business case or a partnership that we undertake with a private sector for a development, we would seek to recover the costs we've invested in preparing that business case and undertaking that due diligence. So there is an expectation, but at the worst case it is from existing budgets. The other issue I'd like to highlight, councillors, is again, we've traversed these options for using RED, new CCOs or some other vehicle to undertake some development partnerships within the CBD before. So these were discussed at length in the workshops before Christmas. And also at that time I highlighted to you the legal requirements around adjusting focus of a CCO, and that this was a minor adjustment, so therefore did not require any consultation. However, if we had chosen to go down the route of establishing a new CCO, that would have required full statement of proposal and public consultation. I'd also make the comment that we highlighted Council's intention to start seeking development within the CBD in partnerships around apartment buildings, and the options for that within the consultation document for the LTP. So it has been discussed at length with yourselves and has been engaged with the community around those wider objectives for city development. So there has been a significant amount of consultation. I'd also highlight, if you look at the 6-stage process that's detailed in the report, we're delegating to RED to undertake some of that investigation, looking for partners, undertaking the due diligence. But as they prepare a business case, that business case will come back to council for approval. So this table or council table will be involved in the final decision about any partnership project that's undertaken. So you will be directly involved in that decision. So I'm happy to answer off any other questions councillors have of the report.
Councillor Bentley, followed by Councillor Donaldson. Yes, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP, for your report. You've mentioned several times partnership. Who's the partner?
any partners, Councillor. What the intention was through the expressions of interest process was to open it up to discussions with current city developers, iwi trusts, anyone who has an interest in partnering for commercial development within the city.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP. This report can't come soon enough, in my view. Brilliant. My only question is, in respect of part 3 of the recommendation, before we expend any resources going down this path, can you assure the committee that these properties are unencumbered by any status around gifting or treaty claims, etc.?
Councillor, at this stage we're going into extensive detail on that, so we have actually sought all the records. I have not got a final answer back, but the preliminary investigation was yes, we are able to do that. But again, we're just making sure that that investigation is fully complete before we would proceed any further. And if there was a change, we'd come back and say that it's not possible or not feasible with these properties.
Thank you. Mr Berryman Camp, followed by Her Worship the Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I have 2 questions. The first question is, JP, thank you for the report. Can you please provide some clarity? I'm a little unsure why the 2 council properties are listed up there prior to going to an open EOI process, because there's a part of me that runs through that and thinks we may be moving to a predetermined state as to where the development might be. So can you please explain to me why those 2 properties in particular have been identified prior to the EOI? And I do have one more question after that, please, Madam Chair.
That is an excellent question, and the intention there is just to be really clear about what council properties are in the CBD of value to those kind of discussions. So I think in answering your questions, you're absolutely right. The intention is not to look at those exclusively, but also it's actually the opposite, is to make sure transparently we're identifying what council properties could be used in that process up front. So that was the intention right from the start, to say these are our holdings. They will be properties that could be considered, but they are not the exclusive and only properties to be considered.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair. My second question is just actually in terms of the TOR and in the business case objectives outlined in section 4 on page 59 of our pack. Is it possible to create more of an emphasis in the terms of reference on creating homes, not houses, and creating an inner city community as opposed to inner city living? I'm just mindful we've had a lot of discussion as to the importance of creating communities, but I'm not seeing that reflected in the TOR, and I wasn't too sure if that was the correct place for that.
I think it's a good point you've highlighted there. I suppose that the technical piece I'm expecting from Red is to identify developments to get housing units created, but actually central to that is we need to create an inner city community of living spaces as well, and I think that's where it also interfaces with our view of that inner city revitalisation plan, and even some of the destination management planning work that's being undertaken at the moment. So I would have thought that's a fairly minor amendment that I could make to the terms of reference, but important to keep that view of communities and homes in there. So I'm happy to make that adjustment outside of this room, if that's all right with councillors. It doesn't materially change it, but I think it keeps that emphasis on creating communities.
Thank you, JB. Your Worship the Mayor.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that issue up, Mr Berryman Camp, because that was certainly feedback. Councillor Maxwell and I attended the Chamber of Commerce AGM, and the Chamber of Commerce are a partner, another partner in here for this, and it couldn't come fast enough or soon enough, really. We've been talking for a long time about getting inner city living in connected communities, and then the transport around it. So these terms of reference are fantastic, and I'm fully supportive of this. And my question is, are other developers, so the concern about other wider interests as other partners? Are they showing an interest?
Yes. And some of the work that's undertaken, obviously, as this was progressing towards coming to the agenda after the first in-principle conversation that was had over a month ago, Andrew Wilson has been talking directly to a number of our more prominent city developers and iwi developers who may be of interest. So just making them aware of the process that was coming, and just making sure that they had an opportunity to start really thinking about what those opportunities might be for the city. And probably for many of them, thinking again about projects they already had in mind that might have been disrupted or impacted by lockdowns and COVID over the last year or so.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. Can we focus on page 59? Under the actions there, we get an overview of the joint venture structures, funding structures, ownership and so on. And I wonder if you could clarify what's intended by, or what are the possibilities with regard to ownership structures. And I ask this with reference to de-risking, that there's a bit of a theme in here about trying to minimise the risks. How will you manage returns in a proportionate way, and how will you manage maintenance in outgoing years on these two apartment buildings in outgoing years? How will that be managed? Any early thoughts? Thank you.
Councillor, if I just try and reflect back to you what you've asked there, it sounds like you're automatically going to a point where we're an active member of or a shareholder in a body corporate who then has maintenance responsibilities on the building. I think that's a long way down the potential spectrum of what might actually have occurred. If we come back to the starting point, and there's many options for what might happen through discussions about different sites within the city, we may end up in a situation where the simplest is to sell a piece of land to a partnering organisation to undertake a development once we've assisted with some of the due diligence about the site conditions or something like that. So there is the sale and exit immediately. There is a minority shareholding options. There's a whole range of options, but I think you've picked up on an extremely long-ended one, which was that we maintain an ownership share right through to completion. So I wouldn't want to make any judgments about what the situation is. That will be part of the proposals, the discussions, and the business cases that come back to it. So I think what you're suggesting is there's a spectrum of options.
My supplementary would be, therefore, given the decision already, or we're going to make it this morning, that this is not, that the changes to the SOIs for the CCO are not significant enough to warrant notification and going to public, and mindful of the importance of de-risking from a ratepayer's point of view, I then wondered about the degree to which there's going to be criteria and process developed to do with public accountability running parallel to the work that's being proposed. Will the development of fresh public accountability criteria and process?
Councillor, I don't understand your question at this point. What we're doing is we're going out to seek expressions of interest for potential investment partners to develop sites in the city, at which point a business case will be prepared. That business case will be considered as for its investment value to achieve our wider objectives of inner city living. That business case will be signed off by the Red Board, and the business case will be brought to you as council for you to evaluate whether you think it's a successful or a reasonable investment decision.
Right. Okay, my next supplementary, because this is developing into a string, on page 64, there is a specification there of potential financing roles that we could be party to. Is that role limited to the 2 apartment buildings and the 1 industrial park? Or is this an open-ended possibility with regard to futures that the CCO, Red, might be involved in?
At this stage, councillors, and we said it during the item presented previously, that we had a focus on the inner city and the industrial complex development. So we drew a tight line and focus around it. If they're successful in undertaking developments in those areas, which are our immediate priorities that we've identified in the long-term plan, then they may be considered to undertake further works for council. They are our council-controlled organisation. So I don't know the answer for that. That will be determined after they've completed this focus on this area.
Fine, thank you. So from what I gather from your answers is that we've pretty much covered all the key functional areas of a property development company as a possibility. Now, given that that possibility is not being precluded, it remains a possibility. I don't expect you to say yes or no to that, but that's how I would
excuse me, Councillor McPherson, we have a point of order.
These issues were canvassed very widely when the proposal came to us about the establishment of extending the terms of reference for the CCO. These are simply today narrow decisions about approval for the terms of reference and not really relitigating them, but approval in principle. It's a very narrow decision that we're making.
And I'd go further, Your Worship, just adding to that is Red, and welcome to Andrew. I gave him the wrong time to arrive. Red is our RTO, Regional Tourism Organisation. It is our EDA, our Economic Development Agency. We've extended their objectives to investigate partnerships for some property development within the inner city. Those decisions are carried still by council, so they can investigate, they can do some due diligence, they can create a partnership, but the decision making is at this table. So I'd actually disagree. They are not a property development company in my understanding of what a property development company would do. That we are extending them to investigate and determine some options for council to make decisions about investment in property. So I would just suggest they're not a property development company on that definition.
My final question, I promise, is thank you for that clarification. You did couch it from what you understand a property company to be. It's an important consideration.
Madam Chair.
My final question is this.
Excuse me. Point of order. I heard from our council officer, he didn't couch anything. He gave us a very clear explanation of the responsibility and the role of RED.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I think, Councillor McPherson, it's been quite clear that RED is not a property development company. That's been discussed at length. So perhaps if you could just couch the question in a slightly different way.
I'm happy to leave it on the table. My final question is to the CEO. Welcome, delighted you made it. Could we, at some point, perhaps not today, have a clarification of how this new venture, these new ventures that the CCO is getting into, will lead to a rationalisation of RED as an organisation? Thank you very much.
I don't think that's a matter for
not today.
Staff to answer today, and perhaps we can just leave that for another time. Councillor McPherson. Moving on with questions, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, JP. Not enough oxygen to the head this morning. Before I ask the question, I just wanted to say, Andrew, I was one of the councillors that didn't support RED's involvement in this, was it? So I'll make it clear that I'm not against it, but at that stage, that's what I thought, given the information. Today, my question lies in that we have a housing shortage problem, we have apartment shortage problem, and keeping that in mind, and that this is just at the moment, it is preliminary stage. My couple of questions is that do you have any partners in mind that you would have thought before you went into this project? And the other thing is that the government is under a lot of pressure to provide housing of any kind, and they are going out with their big fat checkbooks, buying up whatever they can or usurping whatever they can as a matter of what the pressure is for them. So what if the government with the big fat checkbook comes up as a partner? Is there a possibility in this area?
We talk regularly to Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. We talk regularly to Kāinga Ora. They are seeking to achieve their targets of purchasing land and producing homes because they have the need to get some more social housing within our city. We discuss with them, but we don't tell them what they're doing. We have no control over what their intentions or their purchasing intentions are. We do keep an awareness of what they're doing, and we talk to them about it and what the longer term direction for the city is. So we have highlighted some of the problems that we've obviously been experiencing over the last years with the temporary use of accommodation, and also passing on to them our expectations around good urban development, good housing development, and what that should be to try and minimise sort of problems from poor quality or high concentrations of homes in particular areas, those kind of issues. They may reach out to us and suggest that there's some opportunities to look at. So, but as I say, the intention that we've focused on is working with the market, working with private developers. As I say, Kāinga Ora and Ministry of Housing and Urban Development have a particular strategy they need to achieve, and they're undertaking it. Our focus is really in the market space.
Just supplementary to that, through the chair, is if I am to support this, I would like to see a covenant that this would be, that there would be a level of concern for quality housing in the city that would boost the retail development and not hinder or become a hazard to them.
Through the chair, certainly, yeah, very supportive of that outcome, and that's certainly our intent is to be talking about quality in our city apartments.
Mr. Biasini Tulane.
No, my question was asked. Thank you.
Councillor Bentley, you had a further question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two questions. First one is, when you talk of the parking building, do you refer to all 3 floors, including the cellies in the bottom?
Councillor, there's no particular definition of what we're not interested. We're talking about what we currently own. So we have a ground level car park, and we have a piece of strata title and a share within the body corporate. If there was a proposal for the whole building, we would consider that. It's as I say, we're not even restricted to those 2 sites. So we really are reaching out to see if there's any partnering opportunities across the city for development. So I think the answer is yes to that question, but it's far wider than those 2 current properties identified.
Thank you. My second question is, given that obviously getting into a venture such as this, the intention is to make money out of it, would that money, seeing that these buildings are all ratepayer paid for, etc., would that money be used to relieve debt?
That is a decision for you as a council to make, depending on what the proposals are.
Right. Are there any further questions? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. So the motion on the table is that the committee recommends to Council to approve the terms of reference included as attached in attachment 1 in this report, and that the committee approve in principle that RED develop through to business case the car park at 1134 Haupapa Street and the car park building at Pokuaroa Street as an option for delivery of transformational placemaking projects in the inner city. It's been moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Her Worship the Mayor. I now invite a round of discussion. Councillor Donaldson, as the mover, I'll ask you to speak first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, as I said earlier, I'm delighted to see this before us here today. This is about leadership. Some of us have talked long and hard. The way to bring vibrancy to the inner city is to populate it. And for too long, we've waited for the private sector to do that, and it hasn't happened. I'm particularly happy with the paragraph on page 54 that reads, "The process does not preclude Council and RED from entering into direct negotiations without going to the market, where there is a clear opportunity to effectively meet outcomes," so we can get on with it. That's, to me, a sit up and take notice to anyone in the market out there to engage with Red and that we mean business. The covenant issue, support that, but the covenant is here. The proposals will come back to council and we'll say whether it meets the bar or not. So fully in support of. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Your worship, the Mayor.
Yes, and in seconding, I too support this motion, and it's great that it's come so quickly after the long-term plan was signed off. We've talked for the last 9 years about getting housing into the inner city and thriving communities, which include our hubs out in the community, but also the inner city. And the inner city sat there, and we did an inner city revitalisation, which was, I think, very effective about establishing that as the manawa, the heart of our city. But we haven't got the eyes and ears that we need. And everywhere I go, people say, why haven't you got inner city living in your CBD? And because we all know the impact on retail, we all know the impact post-COVID and Build Back Better, but they've said you haven't done the logical, which is to stimulate housing in the inner city, and that includes apartments. So I'm pleased we're the first movers with our own land, and I really do hope it is a strong signal to developers, because many are interested, but they wait for us to take a lead, and then when they see the lead, I've always said when we get one inner city complex of class, I hope, and good design, then others will come in, as we've seen in other cities around New Zealand that are progressive. So this is a good first step, a really good first step. And I'm pleased that some of the questions were asked too about quality, not compromising. Some of our aspects of Wood First we can't dictate, but I'd love to see more of that in the inner city. And also, even Western Heights Primary School the other day wanted to build a skyscraper in the middle of the city. And they had a Zoom meeting with me and they said, where could it go? And I said, well, that's the delicate issue about Rotorua. You can't put it on the lakefront. You know, there's some geotech issues too in other parts. But they said, find us a place in the inner city. So young people are understanding that to develop a vibrant city heart isn't only about public art, isn't only about infrastructure flows and traffic flows and whether it's a walkable spine of Tūtangakai Street. It's much more about attracting people to come and live, invest in our inner city. So well done getting this to us, and it's a great signal.
Yes, I'd just also like to support this recommendation, and I'd like to thank JP and Andrew for the work that you've done on this. I know we first started to discuss this about 10 months ago at one of the first workshops we had before the LTP, and for me this is one positive piece of action where council can take an active role in trying to do something around the housing shortage. And so I'm particularly supportive of this too, because we are, and I know I've had this discussion with you, JP, not just building apartments, because it doesn't say we're building apartments. We are building homes and communities with your wording, a transformational placemaking project. So I'm in support of this project wholeheartedly. Councillor Maxwell?
I support all the comments that have been said by my fellow councillors, and thank you for the mahi you are doing. Here's a question that might maybe touchy on the geotech area.
Councillor Maxwell, I think we're in discussion at the moment.
Yeah,
so
it's a discussion, but I still have a question. I'm discussing it. Oh, well, I won't make it a question, I'll discuss it. Is it going, can a proposal come in that might be higher than what it is now? And is there geotechnical problems? But it also, I'm thinking on myself, if it is apartments and everything, then parking has to come into consideration. So Is it a possibility even the bottom floor remains a parking situation? Yeah, that's my discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Questions from Councillor Kumar? Discussion, sorry, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, Andrew and JP. In 2005, I bought a building in the city, did a restaurant downstairs, but the biggest battle was trying to put a flat upstairs. Took 18 months through the council at that stage. And what hindered it was the fact that I did not have a car park. What allowed that to go through was only when I succumbed to vesting that to the council properties, and it would bring the file upstairs. I moved away from worrying about owning that, but the car park at that stage was the issue. So it's like preaching to the converted that I believe in. And when I came in 2016 and I said, we should look at apartments in the city because that's where the vibrancy would be for the retailers. If we go to the Melbournes and the Sydneys and why suburbia Sydney is thriving, they went back and saw where the missing gaps were. And I think we're just trying to sort of convert one building over here at this stage. You know, we need to have been in this gambit a long time ago.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. I have to offer on behalf of other people some contrary views, and I hope they'll be heard without too much interruption. First, a quote from one of the developers here in town. Just a quick note of support to your questioning of Red, who hopes to become a cloak. Red or access for development is spurious and dangerous. All developers need from councils a clear set of open rules. Sunlight encourages growth. They are wannabe developers using RLC ratepayers' money. That's a perception, I agree. And there is a perception out there by other developers as well. This is something to be rather wary of. The SOEs that have been presented this morning are still, in my mind, fairly open-ended. The safeguards, the so-called de-risking, are quite limited in terms of capacity to avoid unnecessary risk using ratepayers' money. Now, given the combination of pushback from the private sector that's come my way, and the nature of these, in my view, open-ended SOIs, I'm now at a point where I really must abstain rather than oppose, because I do recognise what some have said about satisfying the demand for housing and the crucial importance of boosting footfall in the CPD if we're going to regenerate that economy. So I'm going to wait for the decision-making business case by business case and either approve or disapprove at that particular point. But for the moment, I feel it's important to abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and thank you through you, Madam Chair. Nei rā te mihi kia kōrua o tira ki a tātou, because I te mutunga o te rā, we did agree to have this as part of our discussion today, and I'd like to keep it rather positive. I'm looking forward to seeing this being developed. I can't wait. Can't wait because my mokopuna will be relying on having Nana perhaps in town that they come and visit when they do their shopping. But I'm really looking forward to this, and I'd really prefer that if we keep our mindsets positive, then this will happen, and it will happen quicker than we know it. RLC need to, during this time at an operational level, ensure that such things as Councillor Kumar mentioned, ensuring that all of that those barriers are expedited so that we can get consents happening quicker and that we don't have more barriers put in front of us. So confidence is what we need. Confidence is what I said way back then in 2020 when we had COVID hit us, and I expect and would expect all councillors to provide the same quality of confidence when it comes to seeing this project fulfilled. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Wing, and followed by Mr Thomas. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP, and thank you, Andrew. One thing I'd love to see is potentially the building being a green building as well, because I think that is, you know, as we go on into the future, a really important factor. But I wanted to say that really appreciate some of the comments around the table today from Mr. Berriman-Camp and others as well. But there are some comments that I find really, really disheartening at a time where we really need, we have a housing shortage, we need more housing, we need inner city housing, and that's what people have been asking for. That's what I've been wanting for a really long time. But like some people are focusing on the petty things, and now's not the time for that. Now's the time for us to actually take that lead, to take that leap, and look into introducing more inner city living for our town, not focusing on the petty things. But thank you, Madam Chair. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, I support this wholeheartedly. I've long looked forward to seeing development and housing in the inner city. It isn't just, it is supplying housing, but it's more than that. It's creating a vibrant Rotorua. It's leading into our sustainability portfolios and actions. It's creating a walkable city. We've been signalling all these sorts of things. Once again, we're signalling to developers that this is a viable option to invest in the inner city. It ties in with our public transport plans as well. So it is bringing together all the work we've been doing in the last years, and it's often that case that a lot of work goes on, and we're now getting to the point where we will start to see the conclusions and the outcomes of that work. So I fully support it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion before I put the motion? There doesn't appear to be. It's been moved by Councillor Donaldson, second by Her Worship the Mayor. The motion is up there. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? One abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Carried. Thank you. Thank you, JP and Andrew. We've now got a resolution to go into public excluded. There are 4 items for consideration in the public excluded session. The first is the confidential minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of July. Second is the determination of the partnership agreements for 2021 to 2024, the appointment of an airport board member, and a housing development update. The reasons for confidentiality are commercial sensitivity and to protect the privacy of natural persons. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the Council move into a public excluded session? Moved Mr Thomas, seconded Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour? Against? Carried. I think we'll just take a break here for 10 minutes and then we'll move into the confidential section. Thank you.